The DCEU has officially ended, so here is my complete ranking of all of the movies. What's up guys, welcome back to Superhero Legacy. My name is Liam, and in today's video I'm going to be doing another ranking, this time of the DCEU. After 10 years of ups and downs, a lot of downs, it is time to stop and rank all of the DCEU cinematic movies. Let's kick it off with number 16, which is going to be Suicide Squad. Now I realize there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes with this movie, and the director wasn't able to execute his original vision for the film, but I still have to judge the final product the way in which it was released, and what was released was atrocious. The movie as a whole was just an utter mess, and I didn't care about any of it. The story wasn't interesting, the villain was poor, none of the characters were all that memorable, and nothing at all stood out. I think somewhere in this jumbled mess there was potential, and I guess it did give us the introduction of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, but ultimately this movie belongs at the bottom. Number 15 is going to be Wonder Woman 1984. Because of the success of the first film, the sequel was expected to thrive, but instead it was god-awful. It was boring and slow, it was cringy and poorly written, and it was just embarrassing how unbelievably bad this movie turned out to be. The villains were weak, the visual effects were awful, the story wasn't all that compelling, and there were just some scenes that were unbearable to watch. I think they banked on Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor to carry the movie again, but ultimately there was nothing that could save it. Number 14 is going to be the Justice League. This movie was just an abomination and should never have seen the light of day. I just don't think the DCEU was ready for a Justice League movie at this point in time. They had nothing properly developed, and a lot of its problems stem from that. You couldn't connect with the story, the villain, or any of the characters for that matter, and when the big team moments happened, you couldn't invest in them all that much because the heroes were also new. I think the movie just got too bold, everything was rushed, and it was way more than it was able to effectively handle. At the end of the day, it just all crumbled under the weight of trying to be what the Avengers was.
No, impressed.
Number 13 is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. First off, the marketing for this movie was really bad, and I think that contributed to its poor performance at the box office. Even now that it's out, I still forget about it because there was absolutely nothing that stood out, and it felt like just another generic superhero movie. There was a lot that didn't work for me, but I think the big thing was it felt like it had lost all the fun charm that the first movie had and replaced it with more CGI. There really isn't much to say about this one, it just didn't do it for me.
Family! Guys, that was a signal!
Number 12 is going to be Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Now it still had that globe-trotting action-adventure feel to it, just like the first one did. It still had the solid action, the unique world building, the same kind of jokes, the same fun, innocent energy, but it was quite a step down from the first film. I think Black Manta was done a big disservice. He was a very one-dimensional character, partly because he was being controlled by an evil trident for most of the movie, but also partly because there was no substance behind what he was doing or why he was trying to do it. He was your typical bad guy out for revenge, and that's basically all there was to him. Not everything was bad though, it had some solid action. Orm was by far the best character in the movie, and I like that it actually felt like a conclusion to this franchise. You can tell that Jason Momoa is just having a total blast in these movies, and I deeply respect that, and it makes you not take the movie 100% serious, which is probably a good thing.
True king builds bridges.
Number 11 is going to be Batman v Superman. Now I gotta say this first. The most interesting part about the conflict between Batman and Superman should be because of their differences in worldview, personal philosophy, and what they each represent as characters. Batman believes in fear, practicality, and skepticism, and he sees the harshness of the world through his own personal judgments and experiences. Superman believes in hope, optimism, and positivity, and he sees the innate goodness in everyone. These two ideals greatly oppose each other and make for an excellent conflict, but we didn't see that in Batman v Superman because Superman in this universe didn't stand for those themes and values that I mentioned. It was never about this big epic fistfight between Batman and Superman, but rather a dissonance in belief, perspective, and ideals. At its core, that's what this movie should have been, but instead it was busy doing way too many other things.
You're psychotic.
That is a 3-syllable word for any thought too big for little minds.
Superficially, this movie was decently entertaining, but at the end of the day, it was just doing way too much, and I think we got robbed of the actual reason why Batman and Superman don't see eye to eye. Number 10 is going to upset a lot of you because this is one of my hottest superhero movie takes. Number 10 is going to be Wonder Woman. Now, I do think that this movie has a lot of good things to offer, but ultimately, for me, it was overshadowed by a lot of other things. First off, I really didn't care much for how naive they made Diana in this film. It's okay for her not to know that much about the outside world because she had never been in the outside world, but her complete lack of social awareness and cluelessness really passed the line of annoyance for me. I was expecting her to gain some understanding of the world throughout the movie, but she never did. Secondly, I don't much appreciate Diana's impulsiveness for war. In the comics, she was always a warrior, but she's also always been strategic, calculating, and smart about it, but in the movie, she's always going head first into battle, and it's just very different from her comic counterpart that I know.
To the war!
Finally, the villain twist at the end was very unnecessary. The movie aims to tackle how all of humanity can be ultimately corrupted by war and how every man can be plagued by evil. Ares was supposed to represent the source of this evil, and I think he should have stayed as this surreal metaphorical embodiment of corruption. Instead, he randomly manifests into the typical bad guy with these crazy powers, and Diana is left to defeat him with the power of an unrelated personal revelation. Now, Gal Gadot was not my issue with this film. I think she did great. At times, the relationship between her and Chris Pine were the best parts of the movie. The action was good, the score was good, and that no man's land scene was cool, but I think it could have been better if she got both sides to stop fighting. Instead though, she proceeds to pick a side and kill Nazis, which completely undermines the point of all men being corrupted. I really want to like this movie more because I know a lot of you love it, but I just can't get past some of these things. Number 9 is The Flash. Ezra Miller was and never will be my definitive Barry Allen. He doesn't look like him, he doesn't act like him, and it's hard to really invest in the character when you know what awful things the actor playing him did. Outside of this fact, this is not the ideal Flash movie that I wanted, nor is it the Flash movie that I think fans deserved. I just wanted a simple Flash movie. I didn't want all the multiversal time jumping stuff. I didn't want all the alternate universe stuff or the returning characters. I just wanted a contained Flash movie taking place in Central City about him just running around taking down criminals, but I guess that's just too much to ask for. Now, I realize a lot of people were able to connect with Barry and see the growth that he was going through as a character, but for me, I just didn't care about him, and the nature of seeing another multiversal movie was getting exhausting. Michael Keaton was cool and all, but the nostalgia factor didn't work on me because he wasn't my Batman growing up. I think the movie could be fun, entertaining, and hilarious at times, but ultimately, I think Flash fans deserve better. Number 8 is Black Adam. I think this movie is alright. It had some really cool action, the visual effects were amazing, and it was easily digestible. It's not necessarily good cinema, but at least it was fun. The story was the villain was kinda lame, but Hawkman and Dr. Fate carried. The Rock was fine, I mean it was The Rock, it wasn't anything new we've seen from him. The human characters I didn't care at all for, but at least it had some good action and it looked cool. Number 7 is Birds of Prey. I think this movie is pretty good. Margot Robbie kills it as Harley Quinn, and I think she shines when given her own movie.
Psychologically speaking, vengeance rarely brings the catharsis we hope for.
This film is innocent enough, it's not doing anything crazy, it's just the right amount of wackiness you'd expect from a Harley Quinn movie, and I think that's why it works. But I never go back to rewatch it because there's nothing all that special that makes it stand out. There's decent action and there's some fun to be had with it, but it just lacks that something that makes me want to revisit it. Number 6 is going to be Shazam. I like this movie quite a bit and I think it was a great installment into the universe. With everything so dark and serious, it was nice to have something a little bit more colorful and youthful. The villain wasn't all that great and the story wasn't fantastic, but that's not what the movie was about. It's about family, belonging, and purpose, and I think that's why it's so special. The movie is also able to have a lot of fun with Billy learning how to use his powers, and it's funny to see Zachary Levi act like a teenager, and yeah, it's just a blast, and I'm a sucker for movies with a strong family theme, so for me, Shazam was a thumbs up.
Your phone's charged. Your phone's charged. The hell?
Number 5 is going to be Blue Beetle. I think Zolo gave a great performance as Jaime, and like Shazam, it was just a lot of fun. Also, like Shazam, the movie placed heavy emphasis on family, and that's always a great theme to have in a movie. I like the character of Blue Beetle a lot from the comics, and I was excited that we actually got a live action movie for him. I just wish the Scarab had more of a personality, but whatever. The movie was also kind of generic and predictable, and I think that hurt it the most. It wasn't doing anything original, and the villains weren't that great, but the action was exciting, and it just felt fun and innocent.
Hell yeah. They've been trying to stop the way, but the way don't stop.
Moving right along, number 4 is going to be the Snyder Cut of the Justice League. It's still not my ideal Justice League movie, and I do still think it has a lot of problems, but it's a significant step up from the original cut. The characters were more fleshed out, the story flowed a lot better, the movie was actually able to develop some things and breathe, and that's partly because of its 4-hour runtime, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. I think it helped in not having to rush everything, but still, if you need 4 hours to tell your Justice League movie, then maybe it's not the right time to have a Justice League movie. But I have to give credit where credit is due. It is much better than the original cut, and I respect it for what it was able to accomplish and for what Zack Snyder was able to do. Number 3 is going to upset a lot of you, but I don't care. Number 3 is Aquaman. I get it, it's cheap, it's cringy, it's corny, it's got over-the-top spectacle, it's got stupid jokes and electric guitar smolder moments. I also don't think that Jason Momoa is an accurate Aquaman, and the dialogue is pretty bad. I understand why a lot of people don't like this film, trust me, I get it, but once I started leaning into the goofiness of it and accepting it for what it was, ever since I've just had a blast watching it, and I think that was the objective of this movie. It's not a good movie by any standard, but at least it's a fun action adventure with cool world building, solid action, pretty good visual effects, and just a ton of energy. I think Ocean Master was a great villain. I like the actor, I like his design, I like his motive, and you can understand his frustration with the surface world and how that would drive a conflict with Arthur. This is a movie I can just put on, have a good time watching it, and just laugh. You can come at me all you want, but I like Aquaman a lot.
But what could be greater than a king?
A hero.
Number 2 is Man of Steel. Now, I don't agree with the way that Zack Snyder chose to adapt this character, and I wish that this Superman was more uplifting and more inspirational and more colorful, but once I started recognizing this version of Superman for what he was and not what I wanted him to be, I came to appreciate that this is a pretty good movie that fits well within the universe that Zack Snyder crafted. I still stand by Henry Cavill being a great Superman. This movie had incredible action, a great score, a decent villain, and an emotional weight that actually makes you care for Superman. I like that the movie focuses on how Clark's upbringing and what his father taught him conflicts with his moral responsibility to save other people, and I like that it also explores the perceptions that the world would realistically have if Superman revealed himself to the public. I think there's a lot of good messages in this movie, and it tackles some pretty interesting themes. There's also a lot of good moments, like Superman donning his costume and flying, that gives me chills every time. The only reason this movie is kept out from my all-time favorite superhero movies is because it's not the version of Superman that I know and love from the comics. My number 1 favorite DCEU movie is The Suicide Squad. James Gunn just knows how to make a movie, and no matter how crazy it might be, no matter how unfamiliar the characters are, he somehow is able to make you invest in everything he does, all while having fun with it. The characters were addictive, the story was interesting, and I love that it was rated R. The soundtrack was good, as we can expect from James Gunn, the action was solid, and it has that unique style that makes it stand out. I'm always so impressed with James Gunn and his ability to make you care for the craziest characters. Like, these are criminals, but you still love them. The villain was a giant walking starfish. The heart and soul of this movie came from a character who could control rats, but somehow James Gunn makes it all work. For me, this is easily the best DCEU movie. It's heartfelt, it's funny, it's crazy, it's emotional, it's a total blast, it's bold, but above everything, the amount of passion and love that is put into each and every one of these characters is why I love it so much, and it's why The Suicide Squad comes in at number 1.
Rats are the lowliest and most despised of all creatures, my love. If they have purpose, so do we all.
So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Please like and subscribe for more superhero content and share your thoughts on my ranking of the DCEU down in the comments below. You can check out some of my other videos right over here, but for now, thank you so much for watching and stay super.